There's those of us that have been in the church for a long time, there are times that we miss things. You know, yes, we've read these scriptures I don't know how many times. Yes, we know all the Bible stories in the Old Testament. But has there ever been a time where all of a sudden you become focused on something, such as a verse or a particular Bible story? Well, I happen to have that experience. And it has to do with Genesis 50, verse 20. And it's some words that Joseph spoke. But I never really thought about it because I just tied it to the story. But there's three parts that are actually built into this. You know, the first one being, you intended to harm me. The second being, God intended it all for good. And then three, He, God, brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. So I started thinking, does that apply to us today? Because I kind of want to set a stage here that where this really does apply to us. Because God's Word has a way of traveling through history. He has a way to embed His plan for us. So just to come up for us, it says, you intended to harm me. Well, let me ask you this question. Who is our enemy? We have an enemy out there. That's Satan, and he wants to do everything he can to distract us from God, to distract us from loving God, to distract us from keeping His commandments. So there's your harm. In 2, where it said God intended for it all to be good. Well, that's your life experience. Is it not? Because in our life experience, we have good times, we have bad times, we have sorrow, and we have joy. But there's a purpose to it. Because you love God, because you obey God, you have a destiny. And when you look at that third part, it says, He, God, brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. So it's that part I want to kind of you to keep in the back of your mind. So let's go to the story of Joseph. And as we look at this, you can see up in the top where it says, you intended to harm me. Well, he's referring to his brothers there. But if you look at this, actually, as I looked at it, here's Joseph. That's his brother Benjamin, who are the sons of Rachel. But there's something that's being set up here. You intended to harm me. His brothers actually plotted to murder him. And it was Reuben that prevented that. And Reuben, of course, was going to pull him out of the pit and let him go. But before he could get there, he got sold into a caravan. He was sold as a slave. So there was the harm that was set up for Joseph. And then we come to God intended it for the good, because there were certain accomplishments that had to be done. And you look at these events in Joseph's life. Potiphar's wife, her lusty intentions. Then you look at he was put in prison. And then the thing that happened in prison I found interesting was there were 2 other prisoners that had dreams, a cupbearer and a baker. And Joseph, they told Joseph these dreams, and he interpreted them. The cupbearer was restored back to his position. The baker, unfortunately, was executed. He didn't survive. But there was one thing that Joseph said to that baker. He says, please remember that he interpreted these dreams. Well, of course, the baker got back to them and he forgot all about it until Pharaoh had a dream. And it was about famine. Then the baker remembered, and Joseph was called, and Joseph interpreted the dreams. And this is where Joseph comes to his rise to power. Because through that, Pharaoh granted him authority throughout the land. So, what I'm trying to get you to see is here, these events in Joseph's life is leading to a very specific point. I mean, I think about Joseph, what a terrifying thing to go through. Your brothers throw you in a pit, they're going to kill you, and then the other things, the prison and the wife and all of that. But there was a purpose here, because God was constantly with them. He constantly found favor. But now we come to this point where it says, He, God, brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. So as you go through the story, then Joseph's brothers show up, and you know how that all transpires. There's a purpose here. And Joseph became aware of it when he said, brought me here to this so I could save the life. He was talking about his family and his brothers. But there's something else here that lies underneath there. And what is that? This is the beginning of it, the birth of a nation. Because under Joseph, they were in the land of Goshen. They multiplied. They were very fruitful, and they became a very large population. And they were influential at that time. That's God's purpose, the beginning of a birth of a nation. They had to grow. And then we come to the next one, Moses. Moses kind of followed the same path, where they said, you intended to harm me. Well, who did? Pharaoh. Because Pharaoh did not know Joseph, and he became fearful of the size of let's just call them the Israelites or the Hebrews at that time. So he ordered the midwives to murder the male childs and let the female childs live. Well, as we know, Moses was born then. His mom hid him for 3 months. He was put in the river, and Pharaoh's daughter found him, which she adopted him. So, as we come to the next part, God intended it all for good. So through Moses' rearing with Pharaoh's daughter, what did he learn? Government. He learned the structures of government. But then, of course, the event came where he murdered an Egyptian for mishandling, let's just say beating a Hebrew. See, something's beginning to start here. Well, once Pharaoh found out about this, Moses fled to Midian. Okay? But what has taken place in Midian? The time came for God to call him to deliver Israel. That's where he comes. God brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. So you understand Exodus, the plagues and everything, and he brought the Hebrews out of Egypt. But what is this underlying purpose? We're talking about the birth of a nation. And it was under Moses that they developed institutions. You had government, you had religion, you had civil law, and you had a military. So you're beginning to see this nation develop. But there was something even more about this building of this nation, because it's setting the stage for something that we know about, something that we cherish, something that we love. Jesus Christ. Now this particular slide has impacted me differently. I mean, it's now I kind of see Passover and what Christ did in a very different light. Because it says in John 3:17, "For God did not send his Son into the world that he may judge the world, but that the world may be saved through him." And then when you tie Genesis 15:20 into it, it says, "He, God, brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people." Now that kind of, I understand that. We understand Christ's sacrifice, that he came for us, but it brings it more down to a personal level, to a human level, where it said, "He, God, put me in this position so I could save the lives of many people." How did that come about? Because it actually points to Pentecost, the beginning of the church. How many lives have been saved through the church? And there's a purpose for that. And I'm sure some of you do know and understand that. And that is the crown of righteousness. Where it says, the crown of righteousness the Lord will give me in that day when Jesus Christ returns. And not only to me, but also to the ones loving his appearance. And that's in 2 Timothy 4:8. Well, who are the ones loving his appearance? Us. And those before us that were in the church. And then when you tie Genesis 50:20 to it, he, God, brought you, I put that in there, to this position so you could save the lives of many people. So what is the very thing that we understand about this? Because it's going beyond this age. This Christ came to bring this about, but it was brought about through God. What we're talking about is the first resurrection. When do you receive that crown? It's at the first resurrection. Those of us that will be there. You know how to get there. God has shown you that way. But what I'm trying to point back to is that verse in Joseph where he made that statement, how God has taken that statement, moved it through time, and it applies to us. And look at your life. You know who's out there to harm you. You understand the life that you've had with God, the experience and everything, to teach you and be prepared for the millennium. And then he tells you that's the position you were put in, because you will be saving many lives. And if we turn to Revelation 25, it reads, these people, you, that we're talking about here, you that have this crown of righteousness, are the first to be raised to life. Christ's return. And they are especially blessed and holy. The second death has no power over them. They, you, us, whatever pronoun you want to use, will be priests for God and Christ, and will rule with them for 1,000 years. Then it says no other dead people were raised in it. But what I'm saying in here, what does a priest do? He's an educator. He educates you about the things and the laws of God, but they also educate you on how to live your life. They're counselors. Now, but you're also a ruler. But what does that have to do with Genesis 50, verse 20? It has everything to do with saving lives. What do you think you'll be doing in the millennium? You're going to be teaching a way of life. That is a destiny of yours. And this is what God has embedded in this. And as you look through how it progresses in history, you begin to see how it affects you and what your purpose and destiny will be. It's just, there are times, like I said, been around for a while, and yes, there are times I begin to think that I know it all. Well, that's not the truth at all, because just all of a sudden getting focused on Joseph and then looking at Genesis 15:20 or 50:20, I saw something I never saw before. And then, with God's help, these things start getting put together. Realizing, Jeff and others, this is how I am bringing you to this position to save the lives of many. Yes, the church has saved lives, but there's a much greater work that's coming. And this work will be in the millennium, and it will involve you. You are being made ready for that. You are being made ready for that day when he hands you your crown of righteousness. And then the work begins. I look forward to that. I live for it. I guess now that I'm up in my years, these things are far more important to me now because I've lived a life. God's been good to me. He's given me understanding. But it's even, through this, it's even deeper. It goes further than that. That I chose to love God. Each and every one of us had. But it was the way He approached us. And fortunately, we were that good ground, that good soil. It took root. And then the understanding comes. You know, you have your periods where I know it all, I'm great. No, you don't know it all, because over the years you begin to see things differently. God begins to show you, here's what was written, but you don't see what's embedded in it until I give it to you. That's the same thing He said to Daniel. Go your way. Not time for you to know this, but that time will come. It's just amazing how this... And then I want to move to Daniel 12:3, because this is something that I think about too. Because it says, those who have taught many people to do what is right will shine like the stars forever. Well, as I looked at this graphic here, I started thinking, what is he saying here? Because when this time comes for us to do what God has given us to do, what do you really see here? You see light coming into darkness. We will be light bringers in the millennium. We truly will. That's what this is all about. To save many lives. But now there's a subject that I just kind of want to touch on. I can't back it up scripturally, okay? But as you look at this pattern that God has incorporated, and it has to do with Revelation 20:12, and it says, I saw the dead, the small and the great, standing before God. As I give this thought, and you have to understand these are my thoughts, because I firmly believe in the millennium, the details of the great white throne judgment will be taught then. But as you look at this pattern, because I'm going to take it from Adam to now, what have we been dealing with? Descendants. Fully. It's all about descendants. That's what it's addressing. But when you come to the great white throne judgment, something changes. We now begin to deal with ancestors. And I try and think, because of the training we'll have, you've had however many years you've been in the church in this age. And now you're moving into the millennium. You've got another 1,000 years of training. And I just kind of come to the place and say, could it possibly be that we could be future Josephs to our ancestors, to our bloodlines? Is there a part for us in this? It's a thought. Because when you think about how God has brought us through our lives and taught us all these things, and we have a clear understanding of it through God's plans, through keeping of the holy days. We just simply don't know a whole lot about the great white throne judgment and our ancestors. We will be a part of saving their lives? I truly hope so. Because I've become the keeper of the history of my family. I got my great-grandmother's journal that goes right back to 1632 when we landed on the shores of this country. I have all these things. I have all the photographs. It was given to me. I know my immediate ancestors. And I look forward to that day when I see them. But the question that I have, will I be a part of saving their lives? I truly hope so. It would be a priceless gift from God to be able to do that. To see my ancestors and say, now I'm going to teach you the right way to go that you may live. It's a thought. Could it be possible? I don't know. But I do hope it is. But I want to go back to say, what inspired all of this? Genesis 50, verse 20. He, God, puts you in that position so you can save many lives.